So while we are waiting for the Elden Ring Nightreign DLC to release, or even just learn any parts about it because we know nothing about the DLC, not even a release date, but in the meantime we might as well discuss more of the sandbox and just trying to bring more attention to the things that need to be buffed. And we're going to do so by talking about more deep of night related things in these character specific relics. Now, I have talked about the character-specific relics for the base game. I've touched on some stat-boosting ones as well, but for today, I am just going to cover the 8 specific relic perks that do offer like a unique buff. Starting off at the bottom, we have the Revenant perk increases max FP upon ability activation. Now, when the game refers to abilities, it means your passive ability. So for the Revenant, when you do have your passive ability proc, which is the Necromancer passive, it is going to give you a permanent FP boost. And when Deep of Night released, this was already one of the weakest character perks, and then From Software decided to nerf it for some reason. Before the nerf, it was about a 2% FP increase for every single time the passive procced, up until about 10 times, and then it started to slowly die off. But nowadays, they inversed it. They made it to where like the first times that you proc the passive, it's a lot less beneficial, but then it gets better and better over time, and once you hit max stacks, and then it ends up giving you over a 50% FP increase. Now, the major problem with this change right here is that it's pretty much impossible to get to max stacks. Revenant's passive ability has like a 20 or 25% chance of proccing, and even if you are getting kills or assists on over 100 enemies, you're only going to be getting like 25 to 30 stacks at max. At max, you're getting that amount. And instead of giving you a 40% FP increase, which is what it would have been before the nerf, now you're only getting about a 20% FP increase. Which that is just ridiculous because this relic right here is tied specifically to your deep relic slots. Therefore, it has to compete with increased affinity damage, or increased maximum health, or damage negation. Even reduced FP cost can be more beneficial because you're always going to benefit from starts to finish and not have to rely on RNG. And the funny thing is, your base game relic slots end up housing better FP boosting stuff anyway. The more FP you get by clearing out a Sorcerer's Rise is infinitely better than this because it's an instant 18% FP increase, and that's permanent as well, and you have a very good chance of spawning in more than one. Number 7, I want to touch on the Executor perk slowly restores HP upon ability activation. Now, just as I talked about with the Revenant, ability activation is going to refer to your passive ability, and in this case, the Executor's passive is going to give you a damage boost when you recover from a status effect. So therefore, you can see this relic as just some health regen to counteract the damage lost from the status proc, which I think is pretty cool. However, the health regen sucks. You're only going to heal for about 10% of your health bar, which for a reference, blood loss does 20% of your health bar. So if you were to go with a seppuku build, you're not even going to completely heal to full. And it does this health regen over 30 seconds, which is just way too long. Now, it could help counteract things like poison or frost, which aren't going to be doing as much damage as bleed. But as I mentioned earlier, his passive ability only gets activated once you've recovered from a status effect. So once the poison or the frostbite wears off, then it starts the health regen, which it would be infinitely better if the passive ability just got activated on the status proc itself, but even then the health regen is far too weak. Next up, I want to touch on the Recluse relic that gives you an affinity damage negation boost when you collect an affinity residue. Now what this means is that when you do absorb an element with your passive and it goes into your cocktail, depending on which element that you absorbed, is going to give you a damage negation boost to that specific element. And this is going to be a 20% damage negation boost for 30 seconds. And although you can't absorb multiple of the same affinity to get an even better damage negation boost, you can absorb different affinities and have all those stacked together. Now, obviously, this is only really going to come in handy when you're fighting enemies or bosses that do elemental damage, which typically that's only going to be against like end of day bosses for the most part. And what's even harder than that, you're going to have to need to absorb that specific element as well. And the chances of you playing a Recluse and also having the corresponding elements to the boss that you're fighting is going to be pretty rare, especially because that typically the boss that does that specific element is going to be resist to that element, so you don't really want to carry it. So it's really only going to come into effect when you are playing in a team and your teammates get hit by the boss, and then you go ahead and absorb that element or affinity and then gain that 20% damage negation boost. Which that does sound pretty good in theory, and there definitely can be times where it will save you, but the amount of times that it does is very far and few, Because for one, Recluse is pretty much getting one shot no matter what, and like 90% of the attacks in this game are physical damage. So once again, it's pretty much one of those things to where like you can have this on and equipped if you have it in combination with other really good stuff, but that's pretty much as far as I value it. Number 5, Raiders hitting with the character skill to reduce enemy attack power. So when you do land an attack with your skill, it is going to debuff enemies to make them deal 13% less damage for 13 seconds. Which that pretty much is in line with your character skill cooldown timer. So when you are fighting a boss, as long as you are hitting them with your character skill continuously, you are going to be taking that 13% less damage. Now, just talking about the downsides right away, the Raider character skill doesn't really get that much damage negation when it comes to Deep of Night, because enemies be hitting really, really hard in Depth 4 and Depth 5, and even through your character skill, you're going to be getting melted very quickly, even when you have this debuff active. I do not know why the Raider just didn't get like an extra boost to damage negation in this specific game mode, because his entire playstyle is just meant for trading out, and he can't really do that here. And with how important things like damage negation at full HP are, it's definitely going to hurt him a lot more. Now, this specific relic can synergize very nicely with those damage negation at low HP builds, but even then, those can be very risky as well. So if I wanted to build around survivability, this one is going to be very low on the list. Things like increased maximum HP or physical damage negation, those are all just going to work way better. And I think the most annoying thing about this perk is that it doesn't even apply the debuff on your first hit. So that initial stomping attack doesn't apply the debuff, it's only on the headbutt. Which when I'm trading out with enemies, they're probably going to be hitting me before I actually land my own headbutt. Therefore, I'm actually not taking the debuffed damage, and I'm taking the full 100% damage. Now, at this point onwards, all the character relic perks are actually going to be pretty decent. But yeah, at number 4, I am going to talk about the Guardian relic that gives you and nearby allies a damage negation boost of 12% for 30 seconds after using your character skill. So this is going to be just like a direct upgrade to the Raider skill, because the Raider skill does debuff enemies to make them deal just 13% less damage, but it only lasts 13 seconds and can only be applied to one enemy at a time. Whereas this perk doesn't just work for you, but it works for all your nearby allies, and it's going to be a damage negation boost, so it's going to work against every enemy and not just the one that you hit. Now, the reason why I'm not going to put this much higher is because 12% damage negation isn't really that much. Like the regular damage negation perks that you can find are just going to end up being better than this one, and you're only really going to be benefiting if your allies are going to be nearby you. Which when you are playing the Guardian, you are going to be closer to an enemy, and your teammates are probably going to be close by. But when it does come to helping out your allies, there are going to be some more important things to run, but you definitely can't go wrong with something like this, especially if it comes with something like guard countering boosts as well. Number 3, the Duchess perk that gives you iframes on your character's skill. Now, this specific perk I've kind of went back and forth on, and I kind of put it in the bucket of like, if I have it with anything that's remotely decent, I'm going to have it on. Because although it's not going to be the best perk for survivability, it definitely can save you and come in clutch for multiple times throughout an expedition. Now, the reason why this perk can be very powerful is because it does give you the ability to just gain iframes whenever. So when you are stuck in any type of animation, whether it be just using weapons or spells or getting procced with madness, you can go ahead and use this and pretty much just negate the damage and just give you iframes throughout those animations. Now, using your restage with that intention, I'm not going to really care for, because I think restage is much better off used for a damaging tool more so than a survivability tool. Like, it's really good at just doing so much more damage that saving it just to keep yourself alive is honestly a detriment to your team and just your damage in general. But there are going to be lots of times where you're going to be fighting a boss that has the potential to just like randomly turn around and lunge at you. And as having this specific perk active just makes you play so much more confidently. And also there's other specific circumstances where it can come in clutch, like being able to avoid getting procced with a status effect like Frost or Madness. So if you do have those Faith Duchess builds, it can synergize perfectly with the Flame of Frenzy spell. Now, the reason why I'm not going to put it any higher is because, once again, it's not the best at survivability. There's still plenty of times where you try to iframe through an enemy's attack, but they're actually in the middle of an attack combo, then you just end up getting hit directly afterwards anyway. And also the iframe duration isn't that long at all. So trying to time certain attacks with this specific perk is going to be pretty challenging. Number 2, the Wilder perk that gives your character skill blood loss. this perk is just fantastic. You should be having this equipped no matter what because it's just amazing utility. Because once you get to those later depths and when enemies are hitting super hard, even like random trash mobs can be a threat, and this can just completely trivialize them. Because it is going to do roughly 115 bleed build-up, which is more than enough to proc bleed on like any trash mob. And even when you are fighting bosses, you can just keep spamming it over and over again, which is no reason not to when you are in a boss fight. Just like use your grapple hook as like a projectile, because at the very least you can just stop enemies from recovering their poise, and you're going to be doing some bleed build up as well, which bleed is obviously fantastic because it is percentage damage. Now by no means is it going to proc bleed that quickly against a lot of different bosses like Night Lord bosses, but the Wilder almost always end up coming across some bleed weapons. And having this grapple hook with a bleed weapon is going to make it feel like you're playing the Executor with how quick you can proc bleed. And at number 1, yeah, the IRONEYE. Yet again, I don't know how the best character got even better for this game mode, but whatever, that's cool I guess. Now yes, this character perk did just get nerfed, but it still is amazing, and it definitely still is probably the best end slot for the deep relics when it comes to the IRONEYE, because what it does do is give your character skill the ability to inflict poison. And honestly, if it did just that, it would automatically be in the top 3. But it doesn't just do that. What it also does do is give you the ability to do percentage damage to poisoned enemies when hitting with this skill as well. So it's pretty much like doing a poison moth flight effect, but just on demand, like assuming you have your character skill up, and the fact that you have a relic perk to give yourself 2 character skills is just ridiculous. So all you have to do is just pair this alongside a poison based weapon. I like to use a sentient pest relic and just proc poison and just continuously spam the skill over and over again. And also in this game mode, they decided to add even more damage up against poisoned enemy perks. So it's just going to add even more synergy to these poison-based builds. And then they also added an IRONEYE relic that gives you more arcane, so you can proc it even faster. So you can just keep doing this stupid percentage damage with this skill, which also happens to be the best skill in the entire game. Like, yeah, it's just dumb. Anyway, that's now done and completed. I know like the past couple of videos I had some like higher level editing involved, and for this one I kind of took a step backwards. But the reason why I did make it is because my next video that I am going to make is going to be my biggest video, or like my highest effort video yet. I have a few people working on it and it is going to be a really cool video, but it has been taking longer than expected. So yeah, I just decided to drop this in the meantime just to keep you guys occupied. But anyway, catch you guys around. See yous.